The chill that settled deep in Mary Jane's bones had nothing to do with the biting wind whipping off the old lighthouse cliffs. It was the cold dread of knowing her carefully constructed world was about to shatter, that the past she'd buried alive was clawing its way back to reclaim her. For 5 agonizing years, she'd lived under the radar, a ghost in a town that didn't know her name, a woman haunted by a shadow that now stretched across the horizon, threatening to consume everything she held dear once more. If you're already hooked by Mary Jane's desperate fight for freedom, go ahead and hit that like button right now, subscribe for more thrilling dark werewolf romance, and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. You won't want to miss how she faces down the monster from her past and fights for a future she barely dares to dream of. The salty tang of the sea air usually brought Mary Jane a semblance of peace, a quiet hum of solace that had become her constant companion in the isolated coastal town of Seabrook. Here, among the weathered fishing boats and the tight-knit community of weathered faces, she was simply Mary Jane, the quiet baker who made the best sourdough on the peninsula. No one asked about her past, and she offered no answers. It was a fragile truce with a life she'd painstakingly rebuilt from the ashes of a nightmare, a life she'd bought with a carefully faked death certificate and a whispered prayer to a forgotten goddess. Today, though, the peace was a thin veil. Her fingers, usually nimble as they braided dough, fumbled, haunted by the memory of a headline she'd glimpsed on a forgotten newspaper earlier that morning. A missing persons report, updated, with a sketch that made her blood run cold. Jonathan. He was looking for her. The thought sent a jolt of icy terror through her veins, a visceral fear that seized her stomach and tightened her throat. She hadn't just escaped a mate. She'd escaped a monster, an alpha whose possessive grip had become a cage, whose love had curdled into a dark, suffocating obsession. Jonathan. The name was a whisper of a forgotten nightmare, a ghost in her quiet life. He was the alpha of the Lightwood Pack, a formidable force of nature who commanded loyalty through fear and an ancient brutal power. Their mate bond, once a dizzying rush of exhilaration and belonging, had twisted into a chain that bound her to his increasingly volatile nature. He hadn't just wanted her, he'd owned her. Every decision, every breath was subject to his will. The smallest defiance was met with a chilling calm that promised retribution, a subtle tightening of the leash that left her gasping for air. Her attempts to speak, to reason, to simply exist as her own person, were dismissed as weakness, as disrespect to the mate bond. He saw her as an extension of himself, his property, his glory. There were no physical scars, only the insidious erosion of her spirit, the slow, agonizing realization that the man who was supposed to be her soul's other half was systematically stripping away every part of her identity. He didn't scream or rage. He simply controlled with a quiet, insidious power that was far more terrifying than any open display of anger. It was the constant, watchful gaze, the subtle redirection of her conversations, the way he would suggest what she should wear, who she should speak to, what she should think. He isolated her, slowly but surely, until her entire world revolved around him, a suffocating orbit from which there was no escape. He'd stolen her voice, her choices, her very sense of self, leaving her hollowed out and desperate. He wanted her completely consumed by him, and her defiance, even in the quiet corners of her mind, became a dangerous act of rebellion. The first tremor of her meticulously built sanctuary came not with a howl, but with a scent, a whisper of pine and ozone, sharp and ancient, carried on the sea breeze. It was Jonathan's scent, unmistakable and terrifying, a signature she'd tried to scrub from her very soul for half a decade. She dropped the flour sack, her hands trembling. He was here. He hadn't given up. He was never going to give up. The bakery, usually a haven of warmth and yeasty comfort, suddenly felt like a trap. She needed to think, to breathe. Slipping out the back, she jogged towards the familiar solitude of the old forest trail that snaked along the cliffside. The dense canopy of ancient firs offered a deceptive sense of security, the silence a momentary balm. But as she pushed deeper, a new sensation prickled the back of her neck, the unmistakable feeling of being watched. Not the casual curiosity of a local, but the predatory focus of a hunter. Then he was there. stepping out from behind a colossal cedar, a shadow detaching itself from the deepening twilight. Jonathan. He looked just as she remembered, a towering figure of raw, untamed power. His dark hair, thick and wild, framed a face carved from granite, sharp cheekbones and a jawline that spoke of unwavering dominance. His eyes, once a mesmerizing gold, now burned with a chilling intensity that froze her in place. The casual elegance of his tailored coat couldn't disguise the coiled power beneath, the restless energy of the alpha she knew too well. "Mary Jane," he rumbled, his voice a low growl that vibrated through the very ground beneath her feet, the sound of physical tether that pulled at her soul. "My mate." Her breath hitched. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through her. "You're supposed to be dead," she whispered, the words barely audible. A predatory smile, devoid of warmth, touched his lips. "And you're a remarkably skilled liar, little mate. You went to such lengths. A car crash, a body never recovered, a small town's pity. Impressive. Almost convincing." He took a slow, deliberate step towards her, his presence overwhelming. "But you forget my senses are sharper than any human deception. I smelled you, Mary Jane. Faint, diluted by years of fear and sea salt, but undeniable. My Luna." Mary Jane stumbled back, clutching at the rough bark of a nearby tree. "I'm not your Luna. I'm not yours at all." Her voice cracked, a desperate plea in the face of his unwavering certainty. His eyes narrowed, the golden irises darkening. "You are mine. You always have been. And you always will be. Our bond is unbreakable. You can run, you can hide, you can even fake your own death, but you cannot escape what is written in our blood." Panic, hot and desperate, surged through her. She turned, bolting into the deepening shadows of the forest, her lungs burning, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. But he was faster. With an effortless grace that belied his size, he moved, a blur of dark power, cutting off her escape route. He didn't touch her, but his presence was a physical wall, suffocating and absolute. "You can't escape me, Mary Jane," he growled, his voice closer now, laced with a chilling possessiveness. "Not this time." She sank to the ground, tears blurring her vision, the scent of him, pine, ozone, and a raw, untamed musk, filling her senses. It was the scent of her past, the scent of her deepest terror, and to her utter horror, the scent of a primal connection that still hummed, faint but undeniable, deep within her very core. She knew, with a horrifying certainty, that Jonathan wasn't merely here to find her. He was here to reclaim her. And he would stop at nothing. The next few days were a blur of suffocating fear. Jonathan didn't leave. He settled into a cabin on the outskirts of Seabrook, a constant, watchful presence. Mary Jane felt his gaze like a physical weight, even when he was nowhere in sight. Her baker's shop, once her sanctuary, became a gilded cage. He'd appear, sometimes at the edge of the woods, sometimes leaning casually against his car across the street, his golden eyes fixed on her. He didn't approach, didn't threaten, but his presence was a silent, unyielding declaration. "I'm here. I'm waiting. You are mine." The locals, sensing the shift in her demeanor, began to whisper. "She looks haunted," she heard Mrs. Gable mutter over a loaf of rye. "That new man, he's got eyes like a wolf." The irony was a bitter taste in Mary Jane's mouth. She wanted to scream, to confess, to beg for help, but who would believe her? A baker, claiming her ex-mate, a werewolf alpha, had faked her death to escape him? She'd be locked away. One evening, as she walked home, the wind unusually cold, she found Jonathan waiting for her on her doorstep. He stood there, immense and still, a dark silhouette against the flickering streetlights. "We need to talk, Mary Jane," he said, his voice softer than she'd heard it in years, but no less commanding. She hesitated, her hand fumbling for her keys. "There's nothing to talk about." "There is everything to talk about," he countered, stepping closer, blocking her path. 5 years, Mary Jane. Do you know what 5 years without your mate feels like? It's a living hell. It's a piece of your soul being torn away, every single day. His voice, raw with what sounded like genuine pain, caught her off guard. She looked up, searching his eyes, but saw only the familiar golden depths that had once captivated and then terrified her. "You made it hell," she retorted, her voice trembling. "You suffocated me. You stole my life. His jaw tightened. I protected you. I provided for you. I cherished you. Our kind is possessive, Mary Jane. It's in our nature. You belong to me, and I would have moved mountains to keep you safe. Safe from what? From living? From breathing on my own? Her anger flared, momentarily eclipsing her fear. Your protection was a cage, Jonathan. Your love was a prison. I ran because I was dying slowly, suffocating under your control. He flinched, the subtle shift in his granite features almost imperceptible. Is that what you truly believe? I know it, she said, her voice unwavering. I lived it. The silence that followed was heavy, charged with unspoken accusations and years of pain. Finally, he sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of ancient sorrow. There's a reason for my intensity, Mary Jane. A reason for my desperation to keep you close. A threat you don't understand. A prophecy that ties you to my very existence. A power that could be exploited. Mary Jane scoffed. More riddles? More excuses for your control? I'm tired of your games, Jonathan. This is no game, he roared, and the sudden shift in his demeanor, the flash of raw, untamed power in his eyes, made her shrink back. His human facade seemed to crack, revealing the alpha beneath, barely leashed. I am trying to protect you from something far greater than my possessiveness, something that even now draws closer. Before she could question him further, a sharp, guttural howl pierced the night. It wasn't Jonathan's. It was a mournful, agonizing cry filled with despair and raw, untamed grief. It was the sound of a pack in distress. Jonathan's head snapped up, his golden eyes widening in a mixture of horror and dawning realization. The Alpha's mark, a faint, swirling tattoo on his neck, pulsed with an eerie, dark light. My pack, he whispered, his voice rough with anguish. They're in trouble. They're calling for me. And then, just as quickly as he appeared, he was gone, a dark blur disappearing into the shadows, leaving Mary Jane alone on her doorstep, her heart pounding, her mind reeling. His cryptic warnings, the sudden shift in his demeanor, the undeniable pain in his eyes, and that howl. It had touched something deep within her, a primal empathy that transcended her fear. She didn't know what was happening, but she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that Jonathan's world, and perhaps her own, was far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. The next morning, the small town of Seabrook was abuzz with hushed whispers. A massive storm had hit the Lightwood Pack territory, miles inland, wreaking havoc and causing unexplained power outages. The local news spoke of a strange phenomenon, an unnatural darkness, and whispers of an ancient forest curse. Mary Jane felt a strange, unsettling pull, a magnetic force drawing her towards the chaos. It was the mate bond, she realized, thrumming with a newfound urgency. She could feel Jonathan's distant agony, a sharp ache in her own chest. She tried to ignore it, to focus on her sourdough, but the image of his tormented eyes, the sound of that desperate howl, haunted her. She knew, with a horrifying certainty, that her safety was secondary to her burgeoning curiosity. She packed a small bag, leaving a note for her bakery assistant, and headed inland, following the invisible thread of the mate bond, towards the heart of the Lightwood Pack territory. The further she drove, the more the world shifted. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of pine and something ancient and wild. Trees grew denser, taller, their branches laced with strange, shimmering moss. She reached the edge of what felt like an unnatural darkness, an oppressive gloom that hung over the forest like a shroud. Her car sputtered, then died. Stranded, Mary Jane continued on foot, her boots crunching on fallen leaves, her senses tingling with an unfamiliar awareness. She could hear the faint whisper of wind through ancient trees, the rustle of hidden creatures, and, underlying it all, a low, mournful hum that vibrated through the very ground. She found the Lightwood Pack's main clearing easily, guided by the overwhelming sense of despair and the faint, acrid tang of decay. It was a scene of utter devastation. Trees were uprooted, cabins shattered, and a profound silence hung in the air, broken only by the mournful whimpers of scattered wolves. These weren't the proud, fierce wolves she remembered. They were broken, starved, their fur matted, their eyes hollow with grief and fear. Jonathan's once formidable pack was in ruins. Then she saw him. Liam, Jonathan's brother, normally a vibrant force, lay slumped against a fallen log, his fur dull, his body trembling. Other wolves, too weak to shift, lay scattered around him, their breaths ragged. A wave of profound sadness washed over Mary Jane, eclipsing her own fear. They were suffering. She approached Liam cautiously. "Liam," she whispered, her voice barely audible. His head snapped up, his amber eyes clouded with pain, struggling to focus. "Mary Jane? No, you're dead." "I'm not," she insisted, kneeling beside him, ignoring the danger. "What happened here? Where's Jonathan?" Liam coughed, a dry, rattling sound. "The curse. Cale, he betrayed us. He cast an ancient curse on Jonathan, on the pack. He consumed the darkness, twisted it for his own gain. Jonathan fought, but the curse consumed him. He's trapped. A monster." Mary Jane felt a chill deeper than the winter air. "Trapped? Where?" "The old sacred grove," Liam rasped, pointing a weak paw towards the deepest, darkest part of the forest. "Cale locked him there. He uses his power, feeds off his suffering, to solidify his control over the pack. Cale thrives on the curse, on Jonathan's pain. He's been feeding them lies, telling them Jonathan is gone, that he's the new alpha, the one who will lead them to glory. But it's a lie. He's draining them, draining the forest, twisting the ancient magic for his own dark purpose." A cold, hard knot formed in Mary Jane's stomach. Cale, Jonathan's ambitious, ruthless beta, now a tyrannical alpha. And Jonathan, trapped as a monster. The raw pain in Liam's eyes, the profound despair of the pack, ignited something fierce within her. Her fear of Jonathan, her need for escape, suddenly felt secondary. This was about survival. This was about justice. This was about saving a pack that was slowly dying. "Show me," she said, her voice firm. "Show me where Jonathan is. Show me how to help your pack." Liam looked at her, truly looked at her, and in his clouded eyes, she saw a flicker of hope. You can help him? But you're human." "I'm his mate," she stated, the words resonating with a new, fierce certainty. "And I'm not running anymore." Over the next few days, Mary Jane poured herself into helping the ailing Lightwood Pack. She used her knowledge of herbs, learned from her grandmother, combined with the basic medical skills she'd gleaned from her years in Seabrook, to tend to the sick and wounded. Liam, slowly regaining strength, told her more about Cale's betrayal. Cale, hungry for power, had sought out forbidden ancient magic, a dark ritual to usurp the alpha. He'd captured Jonathan during a vulnerable moment, casting a brutal curse that twisted Jonathan's wolf form, leaving him a feral, tormented beast, unable to shift back, devoid of true control, locked away in the sacred grove. Cale then spun a tale of Jonathan's tragic disappearance, portraying himself as the reluctant, yet destined new alpha. He ruled with an iron fist, his power growing stronger the more Jonathan suffered, feeding off the curse. The pack, weakened and confused, had fallen under his tyrannical control, their spirits dimming, their once vibrant connection to the forest withering. "He uses his power to control them, Mary Jane," Liam explained one evening, his voice rough with despair. "He takes their pain, their fear, and twists it into loyalty. He has them convinced that Jonathan abandoned them, that the old ways are weak. He punishes even the smallest defiance with brutal force." Mary Jane watched the shadows flicker across Liam's face. Her own past, her own suffering under Jonathan's subtle control, suddenly felt distant, pale in comparison to the sheer malevolence Cale had unleashed. Jonathan's control had been insidious, suffocating, but it had never been evil. Cale was pure poison. She realized Jonathan's possessiveness might have been a warped attempt to protect her from this very darkness, a desperate reaction to a looming threat he couldn't fully articulate. The understanding didn't erase her past pain, but it reframed it, shifted her perspective. Her newfound understanding gave her a fierce resolve. She wasn't just helping Liam and the pack, she was fighting for Jonathan's soul. She had come to Seabrook to escape her past. Now her past, in the form of a cursed mate and a dying pack, needed her. She gathered the remaining strong wolves, those still brave enough to resist Cale's tyranny, and began to formulate a plan. Her human mind, logical and strategic, combined with Liam's intimate knowledge of the pack's strengths and weaknesses, became their greatest weapon. "We need to get to Jonathan," Mary Jane declared one night, her voice ringing with newfound authority. "His suffering is feeding Cale. If we can free him, we break Cale's power." Liam's eyes, usually amber, flickered with a faint hope. "No one can get near him. The curse, it makes him feral. He attacks everything." "He won't attack me," Mary Jane stated, the absolute certainty in her voice surprising even herself. "I'm his mate. The bond is still there. He'll feel it. He'll feel me." The plan was audacious. While the few strong wolves created a diversion at the pack's main hall, drawing Cale's attention, Mary Jane and Liam would sneak into the sacred grove. It was a place of ancient magic, now tainted by Cale's dark power. They moved like shadows through the blighted forest, the air growing heavy and oppressive as they neared the grove. The once vibrant trees were twisted and gnarled, their branches reaching like skeletal fingers. A low, mournful growl vibrated through the very ground. "Jonathan." Liam stopped at the edge of the grove, his face pale. "I can't go further, Mary Jane. His feral energy, it's too much." Mary Jane nodded, her heart pounding. "Stay here. Be ready." She stepped into the sacred grove alone. The air was thick with a palpable sense of suffering, of raw, untamed agony. The moonlight, usually a silver blessing, was a bruised purple here, struggling to penetrate the oppressive gloom. And then she saw him. Jonathan. He was colossal, a terrifying shadow among the blighted trees. His fur, once a magnificent dark gray, was matted and coarse, his body trembling with uncontrollable tremors. His golden eyes, usually intelligent and piercing, were dulled, filled with a raw, agonizing torment. He was pacing in furious, broken circles, slamming his massive body against ancient stones, a living embodiment of the curse. He was a monster, ravaged by unspeakable pain. "Jonathan," she whispered, her voice trembling. He froze, his head snapping towards her, a low, guttural snarl ripping from his throat. He looked at her, but saw only a threat, a stranger in his tormented world. He lunged, a terrifying blur of claws and teeth, a pure animalistic roar tearing from his throat. Mary Jane stood her ground, rooted by a desperate, unwavering love. "No, Jonathan. It's me. Mary Jane. Your mate." She didn't flinch as his massive body slammed into the invisible barrier Cale had erected around him, a field of dark magic that sparked violently around his struggling form. He recoiled, a pained whimper tearing from his throat. The curse was strong, twisting his instincts, but the mate bond, faint as it was a lifeline. "Remember me," she cried, pouring every ounce of her rediscovered love into her words. "Remember Seabrook. Remember the bakery. Remember the smell of fresh bread. Remember the day we met in the woods. Remember the promise we made under the twin moons." She moved closer, instinctively pushing through the faint shimmer of Cale's barrier. The magic crackled around her, a sharp, biting energy, but she pushed through, fueled by a love that defied all logic. Jonathan convulsed, his massive body writhing on the blighted earth. The growls tore from his throat, mixing with broken whimpers, a desperate battle raging within him. His golden eyes, dulled by the curse, flickered, a tiny spark of recognition in their tormented depths. "Our vows!" she screamed, tears streaming down her face, ignoring the painful protests of her lungs. "You promised me forever, Jonathan. You said I was your Luna, your sky." A blinding flash of golden light erupted from Jonathan's struggling form, momentarily pushing back the oppressive darkness, pushing back Cale's insidious magic. The ancient grove groaned. The air crackled with raw, potent power. Mary Jane shielded her eyes, her heart aching with a desperate, burgeoning hope. When the light faded, the monstrous beast was gone. In its place stood a man, tall, powerful, and utterly magnificent, just as she remembered him, but with a new vulnerability in his eyes. His dark hair, once wild, now settled around a face etched with the pain of 5 years of torment. But his golden eyes, those familiar, soul-deep golden eyes, were clear, intelligent, and filled with a fierce, unwavering love for her. "Mary Jane," he rasped, his voice raw, but unmistakably human. His true name, spoken by him for her, was a precious secret that hung in the air. He reached out, his hand no longer a claw, breaking the faint remnants of Kale's magical barrier that had surrounded them both. Freedom! A profound tremor went through her, a sense of liberation that settled deep in her bones. A chilling laugh echoed from the edge of the grove. Kale! He stepped out from behind a gnarled tree, his eyes burning with malevolent fury, his face contorted in a sneer that twisted his once handsome features into something ugly. He looked thinner, almost gaunt, his power flickering like a dying candle. The curse was broken. He was losing control. No! You cannot! Kale shrieked, his voice laced with pure, desperate rage. I cursed him. He was broken. You were supposed to stay dead. He lunged for Jonathan, his own body shifting, a corrupted, weaker wolf form, twisted by the dark magic he'd wielded. He was no longer the imposing beta. He was a desperate, enraged shadow of his former self. But Jonathan met him. The fight was brutal, a whirlwind of muscle and fury. Jonathan fought with the coiled power of a king denied, 5 years of torment fueling every blow. His movements were precise, powerful, imbued with a chilling, focused precision. This was the true alpha, his spirit unburdened, his strength returned. Mary Jane watched, no longer helpless. She saw the raw, untamed power in Jonathan's eyes, but also a fierce, protective focus on her. Her mind, now flooded with returning memories, recalled a forgotten detail, a weakness in Kale's dark magic she'd once overheard whispered in the pack hall. His left flank, she screamed, her voice cutting through the snarls and grunts of the battle. That's where he channels the dark magic. It was a gamble, a desperate memory from a life she'd forgotten, but Jonathan heard her. He feigned a powerful strike to Kale's right, then twisted, slamming his fist into Kale's exposed left flank. A guttural shriek of agony ripped from Kale. His corrupted form flickered, then collapsed, reduced to a whimpering, unconscious human, his stolen power withered away like frost in the sunlight. Jonathan stood over him, victorious, breathing heavily, but undeniably himself, his golden eyes blazing with triumph and a profound, unwavering love for his mate. The sudden silence in the grove was deafening, thick with the scent of ozone and the aftermath of battle. Kale lay unmoving, his malevolence finally silenced. Jonathan, now fully human, turned to Mary Jane. His golden eyes, filled with a raw, overwhelming emotion, drank her in. "My Luna," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion, and pulled her into his arms. The embrace was fierce, desperate, full of years of unspoken longing. Mary Jane buried her face in his shoulder, inhaling his scent, pine, ozone, and a deep, comforting warmth that was uniquely Jonathan. Tears, hot and uncontrollable, streamed down her face, a mix of relief, exhaustion, and overwhelming joy. This was the man from her memories. This was her mate. This was her alpha. Soon after, figures emerged from the blighted forest. Old, grizzled wolves, trembling but with hope in their eyes. Liam, Billy, Clarice, and others. Jonathan's loyalists, pack members who had hidden themselves away, refusing to acknowledge Kale's stolen authority, had finally returned. They recognized him instantly, their eyes widening in disbelief, then flooding with relief. They knelt, tears flowing freely, their voices hoarse with reverence. "My Alpha," Liam whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. "You're back." Jonathan nodded, his gaze unwavering, acknowledging their loyalty, their suffering. "Secure Kale," he commanded, his voice firm, the sound of a true leader. "He will answer for his treachery, and begin the healing process for the pack. We have much work to do." Then he turned back to Mary Jane, his hand gently tracing her cheek. "We have much to discuss, my love. 5 years. They were stolen from us." Mary Jane leaned into his touch. She knew it would be a long road, filled with difficult conversations, painful truths, and the immense task of rebuilding. She knew she needed to address her past fears, the suffocation she'd felt under his initial control. But now he looked at her with understanding, with remorse for the pain he'd caused, and with a love that felt boundless. This was a new beginning, a chance to forge their bond anew, built on respect, on choice, on true partnership. They would face it together. Months melted into years, and the Lightwood Pack territory was no longer a blighted, silent land. Workmen, both human and wolf, bustled through the renovated cabins, repairing shattered walls, replanting trees in the blighted grove, and rekindling ancient hearths. The air hummed with activity, with the scent of fresh pine and blooming life. It wasn't merely a restoration of structures. It was a rebirth of spirit, a resurgence of the ancient magic that flowed through their lands. Mary Jane stood beside Jonathan in the newly restored Alpha's lodge, a place that now felt like a home, not a fortress. Sunlight streamed through sparkling clean windows, illuminating the intricate carvings on the great central hearth. She no longer wore the rough clothes of an outcast. Instead, she moved with quiet confidence, clad in comfortable, practical attire suitable for an Alpha Luna, gifted from the newly vibrant pack. Her memories, once a fractured puzzle, were now whole, a rich tapestry of love and loss, betrayal and triumph. She was Mary Jane, Luna of the Lightwood Pack, and her past, once a source of shame and pain, was now her strength. It showed her everything she had overcome, everything she had fought for, and the boundless capacity of her own spirit. She understood now that true strength lay not in rigid control, but in the freedom to choose, to grow, to love. The pack thrived under Jonathan's leadership. He ruled not with the iron fist of a tyrant, but with the measured wisdom of a king who had known the depths of suffering and the sweetness of redemption. His connection to Mary Jane, their mate bond, was not a chain but a foundation, a shared wellspring of power that nourished the entire pack. Their reign was not built on fear, but on a love that had defied death, memory loss, and unimaginable betrayal. It was a legend whispered among all the surrounding packs, a testament to the enduring power of a fated bond. Jonathan, now fully the Alpha he was meant to be, often found her in the restored sacred grove, where the moon petals bloomed vibrantly, the plant that had first soothed his torment and now flourished under her care. He would pull her close, burying his face in her hair, inhaling her unique scent, sea salt, fresh bread, and the wild ancient magic of the land. "My Luna," he'd murmur, the words a blessing. "You saved me. You brought me back. You are my everything." Years melted into decades. The Lightwood Pack, under Jonathan and Mary Jane's compassionate rule, became more than just a thriving community. They became a cornerstone of werewolf history, a beacon of enduring love and true coexistence. Their children, strong and bright-eyed, with inherited golden eyes and Mary Jane's quiet strength, played in the very grove where their father had once roamed as a beast and their mother had clung to fading hope. They were told the tale of Kale's ultimate betrayal, of memory lost, and of a love so profound it broke a curse and rebuilt a kingdom. Mary Jane, now with silver threads woven into her own dark hair, often sat by the central hearth in the lodge, watching Jonathan. He was still her Alpha, still her mate, still the man whose eyes held the entire universe for her. She would sometimes think of the young, scared woman who had faked her death to escape him, the ghost who had sought solace in a quiet coastal town. She remembered the terrifying truth she'd once kept locked away, that she was bound to him, that she knew the beast. She often wondered how she could have been so blind to the love story written in her own forgotten heart. The love story that had, in the end, saved them both and brought them home. Their bond was not just love. It was a profound connection that had reshaped their world, becoming a legend whispered through generations, an unbreakable tapestry woven from destiny and unwavering choice. If you were swept away by Mary Jane and Jonathan's epic journey of love and destiny, don't let the story end here. Make sure to like this video to show your support. Subscribe to our channel for more thrilling dark werewolf romance audiobooks, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new release.